Welcome to Sense and Sustainability, your podcast channel for sustainable procurement. We hope you like what you hear. Please go to www.iso2400.org for more information, learning resources, tools, and much more.
Hello, I'm Shaun McCarthy, Director of Action Sustainability Community Interest Company. This is part 2 of our podcast with Bob Willard from Canada, where Bob's going to talk to us about his thoughts on sustainable procurement and best practice. Just as a reminder, Bob does use slides as part of this podcast, and you can view the video version through our website if you want to choose that, so you can see Bob's slides and get the full experience. Welcome back, Bob.
A few years ago, Wal Mart, for goodness sakes, sent out a questionnaire to their 100,000 suppliers all over the world. Do you know this? To me, this was amazing. 15 questions, right? 15 questions about energy and water and greenhouse gases, and a couple of social things about how they're treating their employees. Walmart, for goodness sakes, asking those questions. Interesting. Anyway, so they sent out this questionnaire, and they asked all of their suppliers, big and small, around the world, to fill this thing out and send back their answers. And a couple of their big customers, like Procter & Gamble, said, just a second here. You don't have any right to ask us about that. You can ask us about the products that we sell to you so you can sell them to others. And that's fine, but you're asking about us as a company. It's none of your damn business. It's you're not a government. You can't ask us about that. I mean, no, we're not going to answer this. And Walmart said, basically, hey, totally understand. And if you're not comfortable filling out this questionnaire, you don't have to be one of our suppliers. And all of a sudden, Procter & Gamble thought this was a heck of an idea. And the following year, they sent out a 12-question questionnaire to their 80,000 suppliers, basically asking them the same things. So when you get big buyers getting excited about this stuff and starting to ask their suppliers how they're doing and scoring their suppliers on how well they're doing on the things they're asking about, magic happens. And that's where the power of the public purse is a huge market force that I think we need to exploit. About 15% of the global GDP is spent by public sector procurement.
Yeah. Massive, isn't it? That huge purchasing power can really move mountains. Well, our website is iso2400.org, and we set ourselves up when the standard was first published as a social enterprise. So we're very much about sustainable procurement, but we kind of, the locus of what we do is the standard. How are you seeing ISO 2400, particularly in North America? I guess my view would be that the take-up is maybe not quite what it is in other parts of the world, particularly in Europe.
Yeah, it's the same with the SDGs.
Yeah.
ISO 9000 was a big deal in the quality movement. The traction around ISO 2400 is pretty disappointing. And maybe the reason is that none of the big guys are asking about it. So, I don't know. So as usual, Europe is a little ahead of the curve on all of this stuff, and it's a good framework. It's just not heavily used. When I was putting together my little assessment questionnaire, I looked at that as well as Science-Based Targets Initiative, SBTI, and the GRI questions about all of this stuff, and CDP questions about all of this stuff, and so on. So the questions that are being asked, or the things that are being asked about in ISO 2400 are great. Nothing wrong with them. But for some reason, there hasn't been much take up. What do you think is happening with that? Why aren't more companies picking it up?
I guess lots of reasons. There is, I mean, the standard's been around for 7 years now. It's not exactly new. I am seeing more traction now and more momentum, particularly in Europe. I think it's a little bit hard to understand a standard that's not a standard in the traditional sense. It's a guidance standard.
Yes, right.
So you don't get the audit, you don't get the certificate on the wall. So it's kind of a little bit harder to get your head around, I think. So like I said, 26,000 is very similar. Now, I like it like that. I mean, my business as consultants, we'll go in and we'll do evaluations against ISO 2400. It's not a certified auditable thing because that's not what type of standard it is. And what I find is my clients then are much more inclined to be honest with me. You know, a requirement standard like 9001 or 14001, the audit, frankly, is a competition between how good you are at hiding the bad stuff and how good the auditor is at finding it. Whereas with something like 2400, where it's no, guys, there's no pass or fail here. Just, show us what you've got, and we can give you a report that'll give us our best possible advice on how you can take things forward. And I think my clients in Europe are starting to wake up and get comfortable with that. And we've got a number of clients now that have done multiple assessments, and they can show the progress, and they can go to their board of directors or their executive or whatever they have to say, look, we've had an honest independent review here.
Yes.
We need the resources to do an action plan to do what we need to do. I think in North America, there appears to be a bit of an allergic reaction to standards generally, possibly more in the United States than in Canada, where they just kind of don't like standards for some reason. And
Unless they're theirs.
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
If they're from somewhere else, they don't like them. But if they're theirs, of course, they love them.
I think you're absolutely. I mean, I used to go to America when we had BS 8903, which was the predecessor to the ISO standard. And I learned very quickly, do not go to the United States and advocate a British standard, because they'll run you out of town with a shotgun.
Right.
So I used to call it a strategic framework. And they go, oh yeah, strategic framework. Yeah, that's cool. Don't even mention the word standard. So I think some of it is about the language that you use. We're just in the process now of taking our supply chain sustainability school to the States, and we're going to be launching in January. And we're learning very quickly about some things that you kind of say and don't say in America, and expressions that you use are different. In Europe we talk about modern slavery. In the States they talk about human rights as a thing. So social, you have to be a bit careful with that word sometimes, and use different language and different expressions. So yes, as you say, I think there is a kind of a United States thing about, if it wasn't invented here, then we're less interested in it. And also because possibly the way that we portray and communicate some of these principles doesn't quite chime in North American markets in the way that it does in Europe.
Yeah, this not invented here syndrome is so prevalent. I came across that many times in IBM, where we would come up with a really neat approach to doing something in one country and try to get other countries to adopt that same approach. And because it was not invented here, we called it the NIH factor, the not invented here factor. And in the US, it is really, really a big deal. In fact, I think that's why the SDGs are not getting much traction in the US, because they're the United Nations. That's a UN framework. It's not their framework.
Yeah.
And also SDGs are actually kind of hard for most businesses to get their heads around. So the language, the frameworks, the mindsets that we appeal to are different in different jurisdictions. The acceptance in Europe of leadership from governments is very, very different than the acceptance of government leadership in the US and in Canada to some extent as well, but especially in the US. Small government is good in the US, despite the rise of the democratic wave that's happening right now, which is fantastic. But in Europe, a government can say, you will report, and you will. In the US and in Canada, there is no mandatory reporting on anything on sustainability. So very different mentality. Speaking of which, I've got to show you something I just did.
Yeah, please do.
This is a blog that's been on the back burner for quite a while, but it's building on one of the things that I mentioned in one of my books as a leadership practice, which is meet them where they are. And you just talked about that in terms of the language that we use, the terminology that we use their language, use their terminology. And I'm starting to realize that we need to be smarter on some of the strategic frameworks that they are using, because they were taught about those in business schools. So let me just show you that. So if you were going to business school, actually today in many cases, but especially in the last 20 or 30 years, this is one of the models that you would be quite familiar with.
Yeah, very familiar with that.
5 forces model. And this is the Bible for strategic planning and the kinds of things that you need to do to protect your profitability as a company. There are lots of different ways of portraying it. These are just 2 of them. But basically what they're saying is, as a strategic set of initiatives, you want to make sure that you are prepared for the traditional kinds of competitors, new entrants as well, substitute products coming from another sector, and your prices being driven down, being driven down by your supplier, or being driven up by suppliers who have kind of a monopoly, the way Intel had on chips many years ago, or the bargaining power of a customer, the way Wal Mart has over their suppliers, and so on. So those were things that are sort of very ingrained in the mindsets of a lot of business leaders. So when they think of the things that they need to pay attention to as potential threats to their profitability, those are the 5 things. And in the 1970s and the 1980s, when this model was created, they were probably correct. Not today. And the World Economic Forum every year reminds us that there are some threats to economies and businesses that companies need to pay attention to. The latest version of their report shows that within 2 years and 10 years, these are the kinds of extreme risks or threats to our economies, that means to businesses, that are on the horizon. The green ones are environmental ones, the purple ones are technological ones, and the red ones are societal ones. So what we're looking at here are primarily climate change related environmental risks. What they're saying is, hey, this is kind of important. So I think what we need is a new version of Porter's model, which I'm calling the 21st century 5+3. I kept the 5 just so that people would recognize that, +3 forces model. And it shows those original 5, which are still valid. Of course, you need to still worry about those things. But what I'm also showing is these environmental and societal mega forces, which are defined by WEF. So they do a good job of itemizing what those are, as well as technological mega forces that they also need to take into account when they're doing their strategies. When you take a look at the environmental mega forces, the biggest one, the mother of all mega forces, is the climate crisis.
Yeah.
And that's why TCFD and the investors and the bankers and so on are all twitchy about the extent to which businesses are going to be impacted by that. And will they still be able to return a good return on their investment or pay back a loan or whatever? So very risk oriented. And I think the risk card is one that we need to be better at playing on all of this. That if you don't do these things, bad things are going to happen. So how ready are you for climate change? What are you doing to reduce your own greenhouse gases, as well as the other greenhouse gases that you're accountable for in your supply chain? How's that going? And really use this as a way to legitimize attention in the C-suite and the boards on this. I do a module on the ESG imperative for the Directors College in Canada. And this is a model that I use. I'm going to use in the session that's coming up in the fall. So I think building on, not throwing out, building on models that they're already familiar with, say absolutely those 5 forces, You got to get those things under control. But there are the mega forces that in the 21st century, not in the 20th century, because they weren't around there. The WEF didn't produce its first report until 2006. 21st century. They're new and they're serious. So how's it going on getting ready for those? And I think the net zero and sustainable procurement initiatives can be positioned as solutions to mitigate those mega forces.
Absolutely, and I think you've touched on as well the power of the investor and shareholders, and particularly institutional investors. And I've seen that as a big shift in the last couple of years. You know, when organisations like BlackRock are starting to say we're going to vote boards out of existence if they haven't got a credible story on climate change, then that tends to really shake big institutions to the core. Coming back on just talking about some of the your point about kind of being in the space and using people's language and what have you. Well, as I said, we're looking at making a very brave move to launch a supply chain sustainability school in the States in January of next year. And what we're finding when we talk to potential partners about their supply chains, and I think this kind of alludes to the whole Scope 3 issue as well. We're saying, okay, we can bring an online platform with loads of resources that you can deliver free of charge. You can upskill your supply chain in sustainability. You join as a partner, so everybody puts some money in to make this happen. But what you deliver to your supply chain, we deliver free of charge. Kind of what's not to like. What I'm hearing and primarily in the built environment sector, what I'm hearing from some very large contractors and very large clients is, yeah, this sounds really good. It's really cool. We like it. But actually, we're a couple of years away from needing to upskill our suppliers because we've got to upskill our own people first. And I like that thinking, because certainly when we started the school in 2012 in the UK, that was a problem. We were upskilling suppliers and then they became more knowledgeable than their customers, and that was an issue. But I think there's some honesty in there, which I like. Businesses are coming to us and saying, actually, we're going to learn this stuff ourselves before we really start to roll it out amongst our suppliers. So I think they'll still like it. Again, it's a question of just changing the narrative a little bit and talking to potential partners along the lines of, well, this is a proven platform. You got to avoid the not invented here thing, but guys, we have been doing it since 2012 in the UK, so just get used to that. And why reinvent the wheel? There's stuff that we can adopt to your context in your jurisdiction, but it's for them. It's not for their supply chain yet. And I suppose I like the honesty, but it worries me a bit because, we ain't got much time to fix this problem. And if we don't start educating, developing, upskilling suppliers to meet these challenges, then we've got a problem.
So two things. I've spent the last 3 months working with somebody else in Canada to take a look at a course that is being used to certify supply chain professionals. It's an online course. It's got many modules. The first 2 modules have reference to procurement as part of the focus of supply chain professionals, but it had nothing in it about sustainable procurement. So we have just finished updating that course, upgrading the course, frankly, to include sustainable procurement in that discussion about procurement for supply chain professionals. So that means that they are going to be more educated in all of this, but that doesn't mean that they shouldn't be still partnering. In fact, we really encourage it with the sustainability professionals as well as the client departments in their organizations on all of this. And the need for collaboration and cross-functional teamwork on this topic is really, really strong. Somebody from finance, someone from sustainability, someone from procurement, and someone from the client, at least those 4 and perhaps others. So when you talk about the training, it's training that is needed by all of those parties on this. the fundamentals they all need to get, and then more detailed aspects of it depends on who they are. I'm also on the faculty of something called the Sustainable Procurement Fellowship, which is run by the Canadian Business for Social Responsibility Group. That's a 10-week program, 10 hour-and-a-half sessions that we do. I do 2 of them, and it's intended to help the procurement folks and the sustainability folks learn more about each other's activities and focus and work together on implementing sustainable procurement. I don't think we should ask the procurement people to become sustainability gurus. I think that's still the jurisdiction of the sustainability department in most large companies, but they need to be able to tap into that expertise in an appropriate way for depending on the tender that's going out. So when you talk about doing something in the States, are you partnering with an organization in the States when you're doing that?
We're going to do it. We are working with other stakeholders in the States, but we're actually going to run it ourselves. We've had some experience running a school in Australia through a partner, effectively a franchise arrangement, and that hasn't worked very well. We launched the school this year in Ireland, and we decided to run it ourselves, and it's really flying. It's absolutely murdering all of its KPIs, and it's doing really well. So yeah, the plan is to run it ourselves. What we're doing is we're engaging with experts in various aspects of sustainability in the States. A very good old friend, Josh Jacobs, who's at WAP Sustainability. They're really into EPDs and embodied carbon and all of those things. We're going to be working with them. There's a number of other organisations we picked up on where we'll tap into their expertise. But basically, we're going to run the platform ourselves, and eventually, as it grows, we'll probably set up a business in the States and start to employ some people. But right now, the plan is to run it remotely. And we've got a number of partners signed up, including one that signed up today while we were having this call, which I was delighted about. And we launch in January. So yeah, it's going to be a hell of a challenge. But and I think the context and the need for it is slightly different to what it is in Europe. In Europe, where it's all about supply chains, I think in the States initially it's going to be a little bit more about having a common education platform around sustainability. Because you're absolutely right. I like the point that you made about you can't expect a procurement person to be an expert in everything. And to an extent, I mean, I was a procurement professional for a long time, and you got a bit of everything. You know, there's a bit of technical in there, there's a bit of economics, there's a bit of finance, there's a bit of legal, lots of things that you need to know. But if I had a complex contract, I'd go to the legal department and ask them to help me. Or if I was buying a technically complex piece of kit, I'd have a bunch of engineers to help me. So in the same way, if I'm buying something that's very impactful from a sustainability point of view, I need a sustainability expert to help me. What I need to know as the procurement person is when to ask for that help. So I need enough knowledge to be able to get some support.
So I hear what you're saying about the effort you made in Australia to partner, but I really encourage you to at least rethink what a good partnership would look like, because it comes back to what we were saying before. You're not from the States.
No.
You're from somewhere else. In Scotland, you're close enough that's okay. I mean, you're from there. But I'm on the board of SPLC, and they've just gone through a change of CEO, and they're very interested in exploring partnerships. They've been burned a couple of times as well, so everybody has. But if there's a win-win way of doing this, I think they would be willing participants in that kind of experiment, just to see, how does this work? Are there other things we could do together? Should they be telling their members about your offering? Is that going to detract from the things that they do? How might this work? And
Yeah, I don't see. We know the guys at SPLC very well, and through our not-for-profit, we do share information and knowledge. So I don't really see it as a competitive thing against SPLC. It's a very different proposition. So I think you're absolutely right, Bob. I mean, maybe not that this bit isn't for the public domain. We ought to have that conversation with them. We do know them. So we ought to have that conversation at this stage. But
well, there's been a lot of change of personnel. Sarah O'Brien
yeah,
isn't there anymore.
that's right.
But Chris Spriano is the lady that sort of was the interim CEO, and she's now gone back to her job on programs, and she's fantastic. She's the one
Yeah,
that
we know Chris. Yeah, absolutely, we do. And as you know, I was over at the conference not this last year, but the year before in Atlanta,
right.
and we got to know the people well there. So yeah, we're certainly open to. When I say we run it ourselves, I mean fundamentally, yes, we will operate the software, the platform, and we've developed a lot of the content. But what we're doing is we're hiring in American peer reviewers to say, look, we've done some research, we've Americanized this e-learning module or whatever the best we can. Now, can you take a look at it and tell us really what we need to do? And we will be working with local partners, for instance, to deliver workshops and events and that sort of
Fantastic.
thing. So it's, yeah, when I say we're doing it ourselves, what I mean is we will operate the business ourselves in partnership with a range of other organizations in the US.
Fantastic.
We're in the
That,
process of finding.
that sounds great. And the Sustainable Procurement Pledge, SPP,
Yeah.
you're connected with them as well?
Yeah, we are. Yes, we know them well. In fact, the Ollie Hurry, one of the key guys in SPP, is married to the lady that to Hilary Hurry, who works for us, and she runs the supply chain school in the UK. And both of those guys used to work for my co-director in Heptonstall. So yeah, we and again, it's a different thing. We're very much complementary. A number of our people gave presentations on World Sustainable Procurement Day, including myself. I did a virtual session for their event. So yeah, we very much kind of link in with those guys as well. It's a small world.
Isn't it? Isn't it? It's
Yeah.
amazing. We just had a chapter of SPP open up in Canada 3 months ago, I guess it was.
Yeah.
And they are obliged to do 4 education events a year. And they had me do the first one, which was talking about my toolkits and so on that are free and open source. And because their business model is free membership, it seemed appropriate to talk about those things. And the people in charge are really, really good.
Yeah, they're very dynamic, aren't they? But it's interesting when you look at kind of scale. In supply chain school in the UK, we delivered 400 events last year.
Wow.
More than one a day. There's always something going on in the school. And since the pandemic, actually, a little bit like you were saying earlier about it making it easier to stop flying, we had to turn everything over to virtual, obviously, almost overnight. And we've never gone back. It's been a fantastic success because you can deliver so much more.
Yes.
We have our annual summit, and we have 3 or 4 kind of big face-to-face events each year. But everything we deliver in a virtual environment. So yeah, something like 400 events a year. We have 130 learning modules now, and thousands of resources. And what we found in Ireland is we converted a core of those resources for the Irish market, and then we're building from there other resources as we go. And the plan is to do the same thing in the States.
Good for you. Good for
And
you.
there is a live debate about, is it United States or North America? Should it be for Canada as well? Oh God, yeah. That's where my knowledge of North American culture starts to come.
Well, SPLC has been very, very US centric.
Yeah.
We've got a couple of organizations in Canada that are doing similar kinds of things. Canadian Coalition on Sustainable Procurement, CCSP, out of Vancouver, primarily focused on municipalities and higher education institutions. And then there's an organization in Montreal, all French, which focuses on sustainable procurement in the public and private sector in Quebec. Really, really good people as well.
So
we've got
those
a
are
little,
interesting connections for our not-for-profit, for our ISO 2400.org, because again, ISO 2400.org is very much about sustainable procurement. Supply Chain School is about upskilling at scale an entire sector in sustainability. So it's a kind of a different thing. So, but yeah, those connections are always really helpful.
so
I
you
think
run the supply chain school? I didn't realize it's, I thought it was a different organization, but you run the supply chain school.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, I mean, basically, we started the Supply Chain Sustainability School in 2012. The way the model works is that the school itself is not a legal entity. It's a collaboration of now 230 partners in the built environment sector in the UK, and that entity then engages my business, Action Sustainability, to deliver the school. We call ourselves delivery partner. So we, as Action Sustainability, we're kind of white labeled. You know, the school has its own brand and its own momentum, but we run it, and it belongs to us, and we own the IP, and the plan is, when we've started to look at rolling out in other countries now. So then we have Action Sustainability, which is a pretty much a straightforward consultancy business. But we also have some software, the sustainability tool, which is all about measuring and managing sustainable supply from our earlier conversation. And then our not-for-profit piece, where I'm speaking on behalf of today, Action Sustainability Community Interest Company. What we do there is we use 2.5% of the revenue of the trading business to fund the not-for-profit, which is a separate business. And through that, we run ISO 2400.org as a global knowledge sharing platform. So it all kind of joins up somewhere along the line. But yes, the Supply Chain School is our initiative. Yeah.
Good for you. Good for you. I first heard about it through a contact in Scotland, and she was really impressed with the offerings and so on, and told me about them. So I was trying to understand what it did, and I'm on your mailing list now, and get all of the notifications and so on. It's good stuff.
So Bob, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. And as I said earlier, we only met maybe a couple of years ago, and we've been doing a lot of work in parallel. And it fascinates me how we just sit here and agree with each other, despite the fact that we haven't kind of collaborated on some of these things. So I'm sure our audience are going to love what they hear from you. You're really taking the sustainable procurement agenda forward in the world. We will provide links to all the various tools that you provide free of charge as well, for people to use. So thank you very much. I've enjoyed the conversation.
So have I. It's great to reconnect and learn more about what you folks are up to, and I look forward to more opportunities to collaborate in the future.
Okay, thank you very much, Bob.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to our podcast on Sense and Sustainability. Please listen out for more episodes. For more information, learning resources, tools, and much more content on sustainable procurement, go to www.iso2400.org.